Welcome to the Healthy Heart Show, where we pull back the curtain on conventional medicine and dive into the root causes of cardiovascular health. If you are concerned about high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart attacks, stroke, or atrial fibrillation, this is the place for you. We will provide natural heart information that will help you prevent, treat, and reverse any ailment, leaving pills and procedures out of the picture. Here are your guides to holistic heart health, board-certified cardiologist and Amazon best-selling author, Dr. Jack Wolfson, and natural heart doctor, naturopathic physician, Dr. Lauren Lattanza.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Jack Wolfson, board-certified cardiologist, and welcome to another episode of The Healthy Heart Show. This is your home for the 100-year heart. That is always our goal. Every episode packed full of information, amazing guests, giving you the latest and greatest strategies to achieve the 100-year heart. The Healthy Heart Show is the name of this program, and you're in the right place if you're interested in cardiac longevity and the 100-year heart. As always, I've got Dr. Lauren Lattanza on here with me. Dr. Lauren, how are you this morning?
Doing well, doing really well. How's everybody doing today?
Everybody is great. I'm going to let you introduce our superstar guest. You're going to love what this man has to say. And again, always understanding that everything we're talking about always links back to cardiovascular health and wellness, total body health and wellness. Dr. Lauren, take it from there.
All right. Yeah, we have a great show lined up for you today. We have got Scott Forsgren, FDN-P. Scott is a health coach, a blogger, podcaster, health writer, and advocate. He is the editor and founder of betterhealthguy.com, where he shares his 24-year journey through the world of Lyme disease, mold illness, and the myriad of factors that chronic illness often entails. His podcast, Better Health Guy Blogcast, interviews many of the leaders in the field and is available on his website, betterhealthguy.com, and on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. He has been interviewed on numerous podcasts and has lectured on his recovery from chronic illness at conferences and several online summits as well. And he's written for the Townsend Letter and many other publications. Scott is the co-founder of the Forum for Integrative Medicine, which hosts an annual conference bringing together some of the top integrative practitioners to share practical tools for treating complex chronic illness. He serves on the board of directors of Limelight Foundation, which provides treatment grants to children and young adults recovering from Lyme disease. Today, Scott is grateful for his current state of health and all that he has learned on his life-changing journey. Welcome, Scott.
Oh, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
So, Scott, why don't you tell us about your personal health journey with chronic Lyme disease and with mold-related illness as well?
You bet. So I had a tick bite in 1996 in Northern California. I actually did not become ill right after. I didn't have an EM rash, but several months later, over the course of a few days, I had what seemed like a flu times 100. My symptoms were so bad over the next several months that I really had moments that I wasn't sure that I would even survive it. And at times that would have been an okay outcome. I had never experienced anything like it. I had head to toe burning sensations, this horrible neurological pain, kind of felt like a sunburn all over the body around the clock. I couldn't get up and walk across the room without feeling like I had really exhausted myself for the day. I had balance issues trying to sit up in a chair, even lying in bed at night. I had to prop up pillows so that I mentally knew that I wasn't going to fall onto the floor. And if you really look now at the list of symptoms of Lyme and mold, which really overlap, I had, the majority of them, dozens of symptoms, and yet it took 8 years and over 45 doctors to finally get a diagnosis. So difficulty walking, the balance issues, visual disturbances, floaters, lines, squiggles, a fever that was persistent, that was based on many practitioners entirely psychosomatic, muscle spasms, fasciculations, tremors, light sensitivity, anxiety, OCD, high resting heart rate, palpitations. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And so from 1997 to 2005, I went to about 45 doctors, neurologists, infectious disease doctors, did get diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, with fibromyalgia. At that time, the only thing you could find online was that chronic fatigue syndrome generally resolved in about 10 years. And that was not a reasonable or promising possibility. So I kept searching. In 2005, I had a new medical doctor that sent me to an acupuncturist that at the time was doing electroacupuncture according to VOL, or a system of energetic testing. She was actually the one that said, I would have your doctor test you for Lyme, for Borrelia, and all of the co-infections, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia. And I really thought that there was no chance that she was right. And yet we did ultimately get confirmation of all of those through blood testing. And so that really kind of piqued my interest in energy medicine and expanding the toolbox beyond the conventional things that I knew of at the time. Started then learning from Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. So it's been quite a journey. It's been a gift, as challenging as it has been. Certainly has changed my perspective on the world in many good ways. And I'm just really fortunate and grateful and blessed to be doing really well today.
Good. Wow. So the last 15 years.
Yeah, since the diagnosis of Lyme, about 15, actually 16 years last month. And since the whole journey started now, it's been almost 25 years.
It's really, it's great that you're in a place right now of recovery, but the fact, that it took so long to get there, and how many people are suffering from this, right? They're just like you. They've been to doctor, and they've been given label after label after label, and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and they're tried on different psych meds. People that care, again, they suffer with cardiac issues, right? Palpitations, high blood pressure, inflammation, atrial fibrillation. I mean, just all these, heart attacks. I mean, on and on and on. And the doctors are just, we're just, unfortunately for us, we're just not trained. We're not trained in becoming a doctor of cause. We are trained in finding the labels. Okay, Scott, you've got fibromyalgia, and now we're going to put you on Effexor or some other Prozac or some kind of psychiatric pharmaceutical for what is anything but a psychiatric diagnosis, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that term, doctor of cause. That's fantastic.
That's awesome. I love your plan. Very, complete. So why don't we kind of take a step back and start with step one? So you mentioned detoxification and drainage. What is the difference, and why does this make this number one in your mind?
Yeah, so in my mind, detoxification really is about binders primarily. So when we have chemicals, pesticides, heavy metals, what can we do to ensure that once they're concentrated in the bile, move through the gallbladder into the small intestine and eventually the colon, what can we do to minimize the reabsorption or enterohepatic recirculation of those toxins? And so the detoxification thing is the binders. It's also reducing as many incoming toxins as possible. So if you're using personal care products and laundry products and things that are adding to your toxic burden, then you obviously want to eliminate those as much as possible so you don't have to detoxify those things. In the detoxification realm, thinking about things like, many binders out there now that are great. I really like the Cellcore Biosciences or Microbe Formulas products. I like Takasumi Supreme from Supreme Nutrition. Fortunately, there's more and more of these binders that we can use to support detoxification. And then I'm thinking drainage is really more about optimizing the body's inherent ability to support the elimination or excretion of these toxins. So the liver, the gallbladder, the kidneys, the lymphatic system, the extracellular matrix, the colon, the skin, the lungs. How do we optimize our ability to detoxify or excrete toxins as much as possible? Constipation is a piece of this conversation as well. If you're constipated, you need to to do what you can to support the body, because constipation and detoxification do not go together. Thinking about the gallbladder can be really important, optimizing bile flow. Fortunately today, as compared to when I first got diagnosed with Lyme in 2005, there's just so many tools in this realm. We've got, in the drainage realm, I primarily like a lot of the homeopathic tools. So things like Picana, Energetics, Des Bio, they can be fantastic. You can also incorporate herbs that can facilitate drainage as well. So milk thistle for the liver, or dandelion, or solidago for the kidneys, or red root for the lymphatics, for example. And so lots of good tools there. And then trace minerals are also critical. I think a lot of the reason we tend to bioaccumulate toxins is because we are often trace mineral deficient. And so, I try to incorporate trace minerals, things like broad spectrum trace minerals, but also more targeted minerals, even like silica, for example, for aluminum detoxification. And then exercise, getting movement every day, keeping the lymphatic system moving is important. And then there's a number of adjunct tools we can use in this realm. So for me, in my personal experience, coffee enemas were a huge top of the list for reducing inflammation and pain and supporting detoxification. Colon hydrotherapy for some people can be a good tool. Ionic foot baths, believe it or not, can be very helpful. Castor oil packs, oil pulling, lots of things we can do. Sauna therapy, interestingly, I think can be very helpful, but I would say there's a time and a place for it. And if someone is really, really unwell, if they're adrenally depleted, if they're not sweating well, it's probably not something to force until you've opened up the channels of elimination and you have binders on board. You don't really want to mobilize toxins internally from sauna, which can happen and essentially become auto-intoxicated. So there is a time and a place for sauna as well, but it's probably not one of the things I would think about for someone that's just starting down this path.
Yeah, that's great information. I was going to ask you about, sauna, and I love your take on that. And certainly it's almost like, I guess, whatever modality people would do, would you agree that we should start slowly? And then number two, what do you think about the role of massage and maybe some of the people that are kind of lymphopractors or some of the lymphatic specialists that are out there?
Yeah, beautiful. So I think low and slow is absolutely the right way to approach this, particularly with natural interventions. You can titrate things up very slowly. That may not be the case with some pharmaceutical interventions. And so that's one of the reasons that I tend to really like a lot of the natural tools where we can increase things very slowly. You don't want to promote a Herxheimer reaction. If people are having a die-off reaction, Herxheimer reaction, I'm not of the thought process that you need to just suck it up and push through. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to approach it. I think the body is telling you you're either being too aggressive with what your interventions are, or you're not doing enough support for detoxification and drainage. I do think lymphatic drainage can be great. One of the things that I dealt with in my journey was a frozen shoulder as well, after having fell down some stairs, and that led to a whole series of things. But lymphatic drainage was fantastic for that, and also just for broader detoxification support. You can just walk every day and also get some good lymphatic support. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be super complicated, but I do love the idea of incorporating some body work and some lymphatic support in this journey as well.
Scott, this is absolutely brilliant stuff. I mean, really, your plan is so comprehensive and so well thought out, and your experience, unfortunately, I guess for you, but is very impressive, and your knowledge base. And obviously, I tend to think the best healers are the people who've suffered and recovered themselves, and you're clearly one of those people. And again, I've been dealing with a lot of people in the water damage building space and a lot of experts, and your intelligence and really care and comprehensive nature is really shining through. Let me ask you this, because obviously you've talked to a lot of people, and like you said, the prospect of moving from one house to another, that's very daunting. What about how do we decide who has to kind of get rid of everything? Who has to get rid of their clothing and their personal, memorabilia, maybe pictures, like things that can't be cleaned? If you got kind of grandma's old china, well, that can be easily kind of wiped down, and there's different products and stuff like that. But things that bind these mycotoxins And as you mentioned, other bacteria, protozoa, other bio, chemicals or non-biochemicals. How do we decide to what level we need to go?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very individual. It's going to depend on how the person responds to remediating their environment. There are going to be some people, and this in some cases gets into the limbic system arena as well. So there may be some people that need to start over in a fresh environment, putting as many of their belongings as possible in storage, just having a completely clean space for a few months, and then slowly reintroducing things. There will also be, at least, this is my opinion and experience, and the more I learn, the less I know. I realize the more you learn, the more you realize you still have a lot to learn. But the work in the limbic system has been really important as well, and we'll talk more about that. But I think there are some people that you can remediate the environment, and yet their limbic system is still so tuned in to the low levels of mold maybe that are still in the environment, or kind of overreacting or hypervigilant. And so some people can also benefit from correcting the environment and then also working with the limbic system to try and recalibrate or reboot, as Dr. Neil Nathan would say, that whole alarm center. So some of it's going to depend on how the person responds. I also think the more holistic the program that the person is doing, if you think of this as a bucket and symptoms being the overflowing of that bucket, how many drains can we find to open the bucket? And the more drains we can find, the more people then will be able to maybe tolerate some of the lower level ongoing exposures. I think if we focus just on mold, for example, then we have to be super, super aggressive in terms of eliminating all of those exposures, which is probably not realistic. I mean, Dr. Klinghardt likes to say it's unrealistic to shoot for a mold-free environment, that the best case scenario is a mold-poor environment. And so those are a few thoughts there.
Yeah, so many critical aspects that people maybe aren't considering. So I love that you're so thorough with it. So then in step 3, you're talking about optimizing sleep. So in terms of the bucket, how do we regulate that? And why does this come after the external environment?
Yeah, so my OCD and putting this together has been a helpful tool, I guess. With sleep, I think it's so critical to facilitate healing. Everyone's going to be unique in terms of the order, but I do think that EMFs are a significant contributor to insomnia. And so ideally, we mitigate the EMF exposure, particularly in the sleep environment, as much as possible. That may go even further to thinking about dirty electricity, to turning off the circuit breakers, possibly. Even there are electric fields that come out from the wall that can also impact our sleep. And so fortunately, I slept really good throughout most of my really difficult times. And it wasn't until a couple years ago that I started having some sleep issues. And so it's been an area that I've been really focused on now for a couple years, and I'm happy to say that my Oura Ring reports a crown almost every day now, which is a good thing when I wake up and see that. But many different tools in this realm as well. So supplements like melatonin or GABA or 5-HTP or theanine, I mean, those can all be potentially helpful. But I think a lot of times you have to look a little deeper at things like, what's the person's blood sugar while they're sleeping? Can you use a continuous glucose monitor? Is the blood sugar dipping, so they're then getting a spike in cortisol to bring the blood sugar back up, and then they can't sleep because now their cortisol is elevated? What's their oxygen saturation? Are they, having difficulty sleeping because they're not getting enough oxygen? Things like weighted blankets can be helpful for some people. Inclined bed therapy is one that I started about a year ago, which also facilitates that drainage and detoxification, but can be helpful for sleep. Using tools like Brain Tap is one of my favorites. It's a headset, Dr. Patrick Porter, that can really help to get the body into a parasympathetic state. In fact, I talked to someone this week that said the problem I have with the Brain Tap is I fall asleep and then I wake up with the headset still on because it really puts them out. There's other tools that are coming out like the Apollo Neuro Band. I don't have a lot of experience with it. I do have one and have used it. And then just, working as much as possible to optimize our sleep. I think it's so incredibly important to really facilitate our healing potential.
Yeah, this is really good, because obviously, chapter 5 in my book is called One Nation Under Prozac, and how so many mental health issues are linked to all cardiovascular. So if you suffer from anxiety, stress, depression, but when it comes to kind of mental health and wellness and how people struggle from previous relationships or maybe childhood issues, we can get pretty pretty exotic in our beliefs of how people suffer from from mental illness in so many different variety of ways. What are your other recommendations? I mean, how often do you tell people, hey, you know what, I think that whether it's a psychologist, a social worker, maybe other support groups, again, like, because I'm a cardiologist at the end of the day, and some things are easy for me, and some things I really I'm obviously not educated enough, experienced enough, and I need to really refer those people out for higher levels of care.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some therapists that work with people that have chronic illnesses like Lyme, mold illness, those types of things. They're not super easy to find. I tend to think that's probably maybe a better option than a more traditional psychologist or someone in that realm. I ideally wanting to find someone that understands these conditions, because there is a very physical aspect to them as well. So I think that, finding a resource that can be supportive is a great option, but totally agree with you that especially the last couple years, the mental emotional stress that people are under is really significant, and this is certainly an area that we need to really look at and to focus on to optimize our healing.
Right, and especially with Lyme and mold related illness, we got so many different, you're going to have to move out of your home, you have to get rid of your things, there's anxiety and anger and sadness and all of these things that come along with when you finally receive that diagnosis and you finally can approach treatment. And even if none of that is going on, your body is harboring those feelings, and even the trauma of being dismissed, like you mentioned, for so many years, that can be really hard.
And I don't think, I mean, we talked here about Prozac. I mean, I don't think that people should feel badly if they need some support in that realm for a short period of time while they're going through this journey. I mean, it is a difficult journey that often lasts several years. And so if someone needs, support from the pharmaceutical realm and working with a psychiatrist and whatnot, I mean, I'm certainly not suggesting that those things should not be considered.
No, but I think we all agree those are last step options. I mean, I think there's a time and a place for everything, but I think we do need to exhaust all things. But you're right. I mean, there are some people that are just, listen, they may be suicidal. I mean, I've seen people that are on the verge. You've, talked to people who are on the verge. Yeah, this is a serious condition that sometimes needs medical intervention. But I will say this, I am super excited for you to hit on point number 5. So Lauren, kick that off. And because I think, Scott has thrown around some medical terminology that is probably confusing to a lot of people. So we'll let Scott break down. Go ahead, Lauren, and ask about number 5.
So step number 5, retraining the limbic system and tonifying the vagus nerve, which is a kind of a buzzword anymore, and overall the parasympathetic nervous system. The Healthy Heart Show will be right back after we take this quick break to hear from our sponsor. Would you like to drink great tasting coffee that's also good for your heart health? Cardiology Coffee is your answer. This 5-star rated coffee is delicious. It's a gourmet coffee that begins with whole organic beans, hand-selected and carefully roasted. It's tested and certified to be free of pesticides, mold, and other toxins. Cardiology Coffee is great for your heart, and you're going to love how it tastes. Order now online at cardiologycoffee.com. Now back to the Healthy Heart Show.
Yeah, so, these steps obviously can shift. It doesn't mean that this couldn't be earlier or later, but if we think of the limbic system as the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala, the fear center, essentially, it's really the alarm center or the anxiety switch in the body. The limbic system controls so many things: the immune system, the endocrine system, the autonomic nervous system, which can affect blood pressure and heart rate and breathing and digestion and so many other things. And so lots lots of things can trigger a limbic system impairment. It could be exposure to mold, it could be chemicals or pesticides or microbes or physical, mental, emotional traumas. If we think about a threat like mold or Lyme disease, maybe as a tiger, at one time having a strong response to, get away from it is reasonable. It is a tiger, but at some point you've treated the Lyme, you fixed your environment. It's now kind of the kitten walking outside the window. And yet when your limbic system sees the kitten, it says, oh my gosh, the tiger is here. And I need to have this same kind of, stress response or shutdown type response. And so my experience has been that tools like Annie Hopper's DNRS, or Dynamic Neural Retraining System, or Ashok Gupta's the Gupta program, can be really helpful tools to help recalibrate what you perceive to be a threat and what is an actual threat. And so you might benefit early on from doing these tools to help lessen sensitivities to supplements and other interventions. But the reality is this really is something you want to do after you've addressed the tiger, essentially. And so you want to have that limbic system responding more correctly or appropriately to the actual threat and not over responding to a perceived threat. And so I would say limbic system retraining has been one of the single most helpful tools that I've seen for people with these complex conditions, particularly if they're really restricted, they're on 5 foods, they can't walk down the detergent aisle at the store, they can smell their neighbors, dryer sheets from the dryer, all of those kinds of things. Those people tend to have really obvious quick responses. It doesn't mean that people still won't benefit from it if they don't have those type of sensitivities. Brain tap can be great in this realm as well for supporting the limbic system, the vagus nerve, the nervous system. Frequency specific microcurrent is another tool that I really love. We need to get that parasympathetic response to rest and digest and detoxify and ultimately heal. So if we're constantly in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, we really aren't going to make a lot of progress. We really have to calm the system in order to facilitate the healing response.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of very sensitive, especially I find that women relating to their menses, histamine is always triggered. So again, it's not something that you just throw some quercetin at and expect it to go away. And whether it's a full body rash or it's sneezing or runny eyes or whatever that might be, identifying the triggers is a huge component of that and can really make people have a much easier life.
Absolutely.
All right. So step 7 is about optimizing hydration, nutrition, microbiome, and gut health. So what tools do you find that are helpful here?
Yeah, so hydration, I think, is important. Many people in this realm have low antidiuretic hormone. They're drinking all day, they're peeing all day, and still cellularly dehydrated. So electrolytes, like I have here, trace minerals, like I have here, or putting some sea salt in the water, maybe using different systems of structuring water, like the natural action water system. There's lots of tools in that realm that can really help to make the water potentially more hydrating. And so that's the hydration piece. The nutrition piece, I think, really is removing triggering foods. I think most, if not everybody in this realm, needs to eliminate gluten. Many people need to eliminate dairy. Sugar, obviously, is not a good thing. High histamine foods, probably bad for many people in this realm. Obviously, individualizing diet, but low histamine has been the one that I've seen helpful for a broad number of people dealing with Lyme and mold and that whole arena. So I think that's a good tool to explore. And then what we do eat, making sure that it's really highly nutrient dense. So I like my morning power shake with high quality protein and fiber and phospholipids and healthy fats and flax seeds and chia seeds, and all of that has been really, really helpful for me. Optimizing the microbiome. I really love the Megaspore biotic from Microbiome Labs, Kiran Krishnan, fantastic. It seems to be very well tolerated, even in mast cell activation or SIBO, providing the keystone strains to really support microbiome diversity. And so that's something I continue to do. Thinking about intestinal hyperpermeability. So I think Megaspore has a role there. Oral BPC 157, which is a peptide, can be helpful for optimizing gut health as well. Dr. Zach Bush has what was called Restore, now the Ion Gut Health product, which can also be very helpful. So really working to make sure that we're getting hydration, that we're getting good nutrition, that we're supporting our microbiome and gut health.
Awesome. Love it. And I love that you mentioned foods being nutrient dense. So I say this to a lot of patients often, and friends and family, and whoever might be listening, that it's kind of sometimes maybe goes over their head, which I wouldn't expect. So I kind of wanted to hone in on that nutrient dense foods, it can be described as like, how much bang are you getting for each bite? It's not just like some empty calories or empty food that has zero nutritional value. Like, you're actually getting something for putting it in your mouth. So I think that that's really important. And go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, that's the potential downside of gluten-free, because then a lot of people are eating gluten-free products that really don't have a lot of nutrient density to them. And so obviously we want to remove the gluten, but we don't want to replace it with other things that are also unhealthy.
Yeah, a lot of processed foods in that arena.
Yeah, we've had success doing carnivore challenges with people. It's a fantastic elimination diet, but it gives the body kind of all the health that it needs, all the nutrients, the vitamins, minerals. I'm a believer that whole seafood is the healthiest food on the planet, and there's no second or third place. And I think, you mentioned bone broth, and I wonder if your maybe opinion regarding bone broth and stimulating histamine is that a lot of people do bone broth preparations by using vinegar, specifically apple cider vinegar. And if it's that generates that histamine reaction, as opposed to just boiling the bones, if you will, which I have not really found to cause problems, and actually helps as part of the solution.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. I think high histamine is one issue. High glutamate is another issue, potentially. There may be ways to make it so that it's less problematic, but I think if people are incorporating bone broth and feeling worse from it, that might be something to clue them into the possibility of that being a trigger for their system.
Is there one particular diet that you found that kind of works best? I mean, obviously you got the whole spectrum from vegan to vegetarian. I've historically been a paleo guy, and now we've ventured into kind of carnivore challenges and stuff like that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have had some clients that I've worked with where the carnivore diet was fantastic for their long-standing gut issues. Most of the people that I've worked with, I would say low histamine has been the most helpful. And there's lots of different low histamine diets out there. I work closely with Dr. Raj Patel. And so he and his colleague, Dr. Talia Hale, have a low histamine diet list that they've put together based on working with people with Lyme and mold. That tends to be the one that I see is the most helpful for people, but everybody's going to be different. Some people need to consider other things like, low oxalate, for example, or low sulfur for a period of time. And so probably something to explore individually, but low histamine is the one that I've seen in the chronic Lyme arena that seems to have the most potential.
Yeah, this is great. And once again, this is the Healthy Heart Show, and I'm Dr. Jack Wolfson, Dr. Lauren Lattanza. We're interviewing Scott Forsgren, and this is just brilliant information. And just as a reminder that again, the title of the show is the Healthy Heart Show, and all these things that we're talking about right now, they pertain to heart health all day long. And as we determine what the causes are of your particular cardiovascular health issue, again, whether it's blood pressure, cholesterol, coronary artery disease, atrial fibrillation, cardiomyopathy, valvular heart disease, palpitations, I'm sure, Scott, you would agree that palpitations is just a very, very, very common presentation for what is actually illness related to water damaged buildings. How many cardiologists are saying that it's your immunodysfunction that is leading to cardiovascular illness? So again, we're going into a super deep dive here, with you, and this whole process is phenomenal and fantastic, and our listeners are going to get so much value out of listening and putting this into action. But yeah, it all pertains to cardiac health.
Absolutely. And I'll come back to that a little bit in step 9 with some of the microbes, because I think there are a lot of microbes in this realm that can directly impact the heart.
Yeah, I think, we've been big fans of therapeutic phlebotomy and people who can donate blood. Jonathan Wright, who I'm sure you're familiar with, he's really one of the founding fathers of of kind of modern integrative medicine. And one of the first books I read when going natural, it was his book, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. And it was like, oh my God, stomach acid is good for you. Wow, I kind of forgot that from medical school after you get indoctrinated in pharma and acid suppressors. And so that being said, again, like, donating blood, we love people's levels of hemoglobin, kind of in that range of, I think, about 13.5 to, up to 15 at most. And many people stack it up that much higher. People who donate blood live longer. But let me ask you this, that being aside, you mentioned a couple different things, regarding the mitochondria. I want to pick your brain about what are your thoughts on IV glutathione and IV NAD?
So IV glutathione, I think, can be helpful. I personally have used IV glutathione along with IV phosphatidylcholine and IV sodium phenylbutyrate, kind of the Patricia Kane approach to lipid restoration. I do think it's helpful. I do think, though, with glutathione, we have other delivery systems now with some topicals and liposomals and other things that if it's difficult for people to access IVs, there are ways that you can get that support without having to do something that may be a little more invasive. IV NAD, interestingly, I don't have a lot of experience with. I do know some people that have said it helped their brain and cognition. I tend to be more of the opinion that doing something less aggressively over a longer period of time is often better than something very short with a more aggressive focus on something like IV NAD. So for some people, it may be a good tool. I tend to be drawn to other ways to support it orally over the long haul rather than more aggressive short courses of IVs, which some people benefit from, but that's my thought process.
Yeah, I think, you're right. I mean, listen, we've been living in nature for millions of years. The bugs were here first, we came later, and we co-evolved, with them. So you're right. This whole kind of strategy of just blanket killing everything will wind up killing us. I think what we're always focusing on, right, is just how do we boost the immune system up? How do we support the immune system and able to, to get the job done so the immune system can allow us to live in balance with these? And that never sat well with me either, Scott. These people, and I've seen many cases of acute Lyme as a cardiologist working in hospitals where, coming out of Chicago, 20-year-old kid, he comes back from a trip, in the Wisconsin woods, and now he's got acute Lyme and a heart rate of 25. He needs a temporary pacemaker. Everybody gets nervous. We give him some antibiotics. He gets better within a few days, and he goes home. But this whole kind of chronic, Lyme and these antibiotic protocols of 2 years, 3 years of, doxycycline, clindamycin, these other heavy duty antibiotics, it just never sat well as an approach. But now I understand that there is a problem, and there are just better solutions than what we just described.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, you mentioned so many interesting things. One thing that I wanted to ask just a little bit more about, what sort of like the harmonic frequencies, what are some tools that you use in that realm?
I work with a company in Vancouver called Free Medica. They have a wearable device called the Wave One that piggybacks frequencies to help support detoxification and support the body in dealing with a lot of Lyme associated issues. And I've been an advisor to them for the past few years. And so that's one tool that I have found helpful in this realm. It's actually downstairs, or I would show you. It is something that I wear every day just as a nice adjunct. I mean, I think there is benefit. It's not necessarily the solution for everyone. It's not going to solve the mold in your environment, those types of things. But I think there are often ways that we can incorporate frequency to help support the body. And then I also love frequency-specific microcurrent is a top tool. Dr. Carolyn McMakin's work in doing everything from supporting the limbic system, the vagus nerve, dealing with what's called in the system concussion, but dealing with, lots of traumas and drainage and many things that you can program that device to do. So I also incorporate the frequency specific microcurrent into my program as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So and in step 10, I love this because it really just shows that we are completely holistic. You mentioned exploring dental contributors. So why does this come late in the process, and just kind of touch on that for us?
Yeah, so my mentors in this realm have been Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt and Dr. Simon Yu primarily. I think earlier on, they would have also put this earlier in a program like this, and it is still a major focus for them. But I would say my understanding now is that Dr. Simon Yu tends to address the parasites and kind of support and stabilize the body before getting into the dental interventions. Dr. Klinghardt in the past few years has commented that people seem to do much better with dental procedures and recovery and long-term benefits from those procedures if they first have addressed the endogenous retroviruses. We also know that Bartonella and even Babesia can play a role in some of these dental and jawbone type issues. And so supporting some of that microbial burden can be helpful as well. Obviously, amalgams can play a role. My caution here is I've seen lots of people that have had amalgams removed by dentists that didn't take all of the precautions, were not biological, and that was actually where their many-year chronic illness started. And so, yes, I think that can be helpful, but I would urge people, if you're jumping into the dental work, make sure you're coordinating that with the captain of your ship. Who is the doctor that you're working with that's driving your overall recovery? What's the right time to do it? What's the right support, and so on. Root canals can play a role. We know they can affect the meridians, the organ systems as well. So some people may need to explore the root canal potential contribution to their condition. And then unfortunately, many people in this realm, and I actually learned from Dr. Stuart Nunley that it's also not uncommon in the general population, but that if you had, for example, most commonly at the site of prior teeth extractions, like the wisdom teeth, if you didn't have the dental ligament removed, if you didn't maybe have things like PRF or other things in there to support healing, you can develop a chronic infection there that becomes a cavitation. And so that was something I hope to never deal with. I read a book way back when called The Tick Slayer with Perry Fields, and she had this chapter detailing her cavitation ordeal. And I thought, oh, thank goodness I never had to do that. And my first visit with Dr. Simon Yu at a conference that I was attending, he evaluated me and he said, I think you have a dental cavitation. And so, you know, they go back in and kind of clean out that area and, you know, remove the infection that's there. It's not a super common thing that people see immediate improvements. It takes some time after a procedure like that, but I think it is one more thing that's burdening the body, burdening the immune system, producing these toxic mercaptans and thioethers and other things in the body as well. So looking at the dental contributors, I think, is important, but I don't think it's something to jump into lightly because it can be a really significant stress on the system depending on what needs to be done. And you really want to coordinate that with your primary captain of your ship or provider.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, I've sent people to her, you know, over the years, and we've had very good success. And again, it's one step of the picture, and it's never the ultimate answer where all of a sudden they go from you know, feeling you know, at 0% and now they're back at 100%. But it's part of the picture for sure. Thank you. Wrap it up, Dr. Lauren. What do you got?
All right. So step 11, last but certainly not least, we have regeneration and restoration. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so I think by the time we've gone through Lyme and mold and all of the things that we've experienced, that it certainly has taken a toll on our body. And so we need to look at what we can do to support regeneration, restoration. I think the phospholipids that we talked about a little bit earlier, whether that's, you know, phosphatidylcholine or a phospholipid blend in your morning smoothie or doing some of the IV lipid replacements, can be very helpful. I do think the photobiomodulation can be a nice tool here for supporting the mitochondria, supporting the collagen, for example. Peptides are also another emerging tool for repair and restoration. Unfortunately, they've become a little more restricted by the FDA recently, but there are still some peptide therapies that are available through practitioners that can be really helpful. And then one of the things that I incorporated probably 4 to 6 months ago now is daily exercise with oxygen therapy. So using the Live O2 system for about 25 minutes a day to really get that deep oxygen support in the body to help restore as well. So those are a few things that you can do. There's certainly many others, but I think that restoration, regeneration support. I haven't so far in the Lyme and mold illness arena been super impressed with some of the stem cell therapies. I explored those many years ago as well, but I know they're evolving. There's exosomes and other things. And so, certainly open to the possibility that those become broader supports for people down the road. I just haven't seen it super helpful unless you've also done all of the other things. And so that's another reason why I would say, obviously, a lot of this is at the end because you need to unburden the body first. And so there may be some role for some of those things in the future as well.
Awesome. Thank you. I love the kind of all very diverse. I love the phosphatidylcholine. I take it myself every single day, and actually have only one time used the Live O2, and kind of a bit of a shock to the system initially, but very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you. You've given us honestly so much very diverse information, so much to think about. Hopefully a lot of our listeners will take a lot from this. So many great things to think about. But one final question for you is, how do you live a heart healthy life, Scott?
Good question. So I do think that the daily exercise with oxygen therapy is certainly helping that oxygenation. I eat a highly nutrient dense, gluten-free diet with healthy fats and healthy protein. I work on supporting the mitochondria, both with things like NADH and CoQ10, but also with the photobiomodulation. I'm constantly working on reducing inflammation through optimizing the external environment, supporting detoxification. I use black seed oil, which can also be really helpful in that realm for inflammation, but also is very heart healthy also. And then things like, electrolytes, for example, that can also be really helpful for the heart. So very similar to what we talked through, kind of a broad focus on a lot of different things that also fortunately are healthy for the heart. Also remembering a lot of those microbial contributors that we talked about, the Borrelia, the Bartonella, the viruses, the chlamydia, mycoplasma, those types of things that also we need to consider in supporting optimal heart health.
Absolutely. So many different avenues to consider, some harder to get our hands on than others, but really it's not a far cry from just about any of our listeners that we can do something heart healthy every single day. So why don't you just remind us again where our listeners can find more of your information that you have shared with us today.
You bet. So I'm so thankful that we were able to have this conversation today. I am involved with the Lyme Light Foundation. And so that is an organization that has now given out almost $7 million to children and young adults that need to access treatment care for Lyme disease that otherwise would not be able to. So if someone listening is interested in either potentially applying for a grant or supporting the organization, they can learn more about us at limelightfoundation.org. My website, betterhealthguy.com. That's betterhealthguy.com. And I think the last thing I would say is it's just really important not to lose hope. Don't give up. So much has changed in this realm of chronic Lyme and mold. The rate at which new understanding and new tools is coming onto the scene, it's really accelerating in a very significant way. And so I just want people to leave this conversation knowing that there is hope, that people can get well, and to hold on to that.
Right. Thank you so much for leaving with that message of hope. There's education coming out, and I know that me and Dr. Jack Wolfson have learned so much from you today. So thank you so much for your time, and we will be speaking with you again shortly, I hope.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lowen. It was fantastic. Be well.
That does it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to The Healthy Heart Show. Please help us get the word out by liking and subscribing to our podcast and our Facebook page, Natural Heart Doctor. Please show support for our podcast sponsor, Cardiology Coffee, your resource for organic, antioxidant-rich, mold and pesticide-free coffee shipped straight to your door. Learn more by adding @cardiologycoffee on Instagram and visiting cardiologycoffee.com. This podcast provides materials for information and educational purposes only, and should not be considered medical advice. We encourage you to contact your physician for any of the health issues discussed here.